Broadcasting live in Tempe, Arizona, you are tuning in to the Culture Crush Business Podcast with Kendra Maples. We are here to highlight great companies and great resources for improving company culture.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Culture Crush Business Podcast. On this podcast, we focus on everything surrounding businesses with a good company culture. We deep dive into companies that are crushing it with a great culture, and we bring in the resources that are out there to help improve. At the root of what the business does, that's what we are. We are a hub of resources for improving company culture. So that means bringing all of these resources together so that when companies are in need of that support, they don't have to go Google on the web and search. I have no idea what they're looking for. They can come to us and we compare them with those resources that they need. Before we jump in and I introduce our two amazing guests today, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Gateway Bank. Gateway Bank has been absolutely phenomenal as a sponsor, not only because they just are a great company to align with in the culture space, but also with what they do on the back end, just with how they support and grow their own team. So when you work with Gateway, you don't have to call a 1-800 number for support or submit your loan application and then wait weeks and months to try and hear from somebody. You get fast personal service from a team who knows you and cares about you. Whether you need a loan or banking services from your business, Gateway is there to help. Visit gcbaz.com/culture crush for details and a free consultation with Bank President James Christensen. With that all being said, I'm always excited for my guests. I say every time, I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm always excited for my guests. This one is a little bit different because both of you are yonder. nowhere near being able to come into the studio, although I did have the chance to meet Toby in person recently. So my two amazing guests today, Toby and Emily, these two lovely individuals are the co-founders together for a company called Freeformers. I'll let them introduce and tell you a little bit about that. But first, I want to hear about them as people. So I am going to knock it over first, Emily, to you. Emily Forrest, please tell us about you, who you are, and maybe how you met this other crazy gentleman that you work with.
I'm gonna start with the end bit first. No,
Okay.
I'm not. I'm Emily. What do? I like blue. I'm always wearing blue. I'm actually trying to branch out, but company colors today. So if you can't see it, yellow, red, and blue. That's our company branding. What do I like doing? I like reading. I like data. I'm the quiet one and the awkward one, and normally Toby goes first, and I kind of riff off what he's going on. But Kendra's throwing me on the spot here, so here I am going first and trying to be loud and gregarious, and it doesn't really suit me. What I do at Freeform is I work a lot with our clients to help them implement ways of measuring things. Toby will tell you more about what it is that we do, but I'm the real kind of the data person who sits behind the scenes and does an awful lot of the work day to day with clients. I met Toby. We used to work for another company together. We started bonding over, this is going to be such a British thing to say, isn't it? We started bonding over motorway service stations. I don't even know if you have motorway service stations. Like on the interstate, do you have like service areas?
No.
On the interstate? No? Oh my goodness. Okay.
I mean, we have like toll booths in some spots, but
no,
maybe
like service stations where you can stop and you can get food, and they always have like a, oh my gosh, I don't even know American references.
This is my favorite thing ever. Someone trying to explain what a service station is.
On the freeway?
Yeah, like on the like
on the side, on the side of the freeway, not literally
on the side. Yeah, you like take the little stop road.
Yeah, but in the UK,
have a gas station.
Like they are. See, I couldn't station.
You're mansplaining for me now, Tony.
but like you get a gas station, like one of the best service stations here in the UK. Or the most service station is one called Beaconsfield, and it has like Nando's, KFC, McDonald's, petrol station, hotel, a pub. It has everything. Like it's like a little town.
Anyway, every service station is different.
Off the freeway.
Yeah, well, it's for like you to stop because you're not meant to drive more than like 2 hours because you get tired and we have accidents and
And it's
whatnot.
British, right? So that's why there's a pub. You stop there, you have a pint, and then you get back
And
on
then
the
you
road.
just carry on drink driving. No, you don't. Anyway. And so we met we met and we started bonding over like which of the different service stations have what features because obviously. And then a few weeks later or a few months later, we were on a train up to Glasgow and we were like, oh, we should start a business together. And Toby was like, yeah, I completely agree. We should start a business together. This was 5 years ago and he completely forgot. And I reminded him after we were working together for 4 months. And that is how I met Toby Kang.
I just
I told you, it's chaos. Sorry.
my notes today so far say Birmingham for chocolate and look up service stations. So I'm very excited about this. I also love that you went from working together. I'm sure I'll have questions about that. And then I guess I'll call it bonding over this conversation of service stations. And then fast forward to, hey, let's start a company together. This is beautiful. I love where this started. Toby, tell us about you and your side of this service station story.
Well, I suppose I'm a massive service station nerd, as you can guess. Like I have created quizzes and all sorts of kind of fun interactive things to do with UK service stations. I'm not going to go into those now because I will bore you, but I can tell you, for example, which was the first carbon neutral service station in the UK. Weatherby Services on the A1. But anyway, myself and Emily, I can kind of pick up the story really because we said we'd start a business together 5 years ago, and then I completely forgot about it. And I went and started a business by myself in August of last year. And then Emily picked the phone up to me about 3 months later and go, "Hey, what are you doing? Why have you started a business without me? Can we do it together?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'm fine with me. Like if there's one person I'd want to start a company with, it'd be you." And then, as Emily said, 4 months after that, she then told me, "Yeah, this was like a prior agreement we had." And I was like, "I cannot remember that at all. I'm so sorry." So me and Emily kind of have like kind of this relationship where we kind of have bumped into each other over, we both left that company, then kind of came together and went apart, came together and went apart. But primarily kind of like with a learning and development and training lens in what we do. Both, Emily kind of looking at data. I probably come at more like behavioral economics, experience design type stuff. But when you put those two things together, we find that magic happens. So yeah, that's kind of what we do. And I just like pop culture references. So this is where me and like you will not meet two more different people. I love pop culture references. I love the Arctic Monkeys, a British band. We've got Edgar Wright films here, so like Baby Driver, Shaun of the Dead, all those kind of things. Yeah. And then over here we've got the US version of The Office, which is way better than the UK version of The Office. It must be said, but it's the most quotable thing that I just do all the time. And Emily has 0 point of reference with any of that stuff.
He goes, "Have you seen?" It doesn't even matter. I'm like, no, I haven't.
I'm so excited that our version of The Office is better. Our chocolate's not better, but our version of The Office is better. Now I have to go back and watch your version of The Office.
Yeah, if you want to go through the list of things that are better in the US than they are in the UK and vice versa, I've got a couple of those lists written down.
My notes really have nothing to do with company culture so far. So
I tell you, we can do a nice little segue. This is how we start a lot of our meetings, especially on Monday morning. We allow this kind of chat because we work remotely. We're like, Kendra, I've not met you face to face, and we're also, we're miles and miles apart. And we call this culture building. Like we actually set aside time for it, for this laughing around, joking around, getting to know each other a little bit more because it helps us to build our culture.
I am so glad that you mentioned that because whether you are remote or in person, there has to be this opportunity for connection. We recorded a podcast a couple of days ago, and the whole conversation was about connection and community and how do you build that community, especially when we are not located near each other at all. And even with you guys working together and still not close to each other. So how do you build those moments in? So I love that you say that that's intentional, even in the meetings with just the two of you, and how you give yourselves that opportunity to connect. That connection is going to allow you to build that culture so that when moments happen and there's moments of trauma or stress or whatever it is, Toby can think back and go, oh, no. This is a thing that sets Emily off. Or Emily can go, okay, what's something that I can do that's positive to kind of bring Toby out of this funk, right? Whatever it is, it allows you to understand and connect with each other as people, not just business partners. So thank you for throwing it in there. I have two different directions I want to go in. I want to hear more about freeformers, but I want to back up a second and ask a question that sometimes I don't ask. That's a very basic question for this show that's all focused on company culture. Is what is company culture? Right? Emily, you said you allow this time intentionally in the beginning of meetings so that you can build that culture. What is culture? If you had to explain it to Joe Schmo, how would you explain in your own way what is company culture?
So I think company culture is all the mostly unwritten and sometimes unseen rules, relationships that are going on that work together to build up an ecosystem, if you like. Like if you think of like the jungle as an ecosystem, you've got all the plants like and animals working together. They all interact in different ways. There's rules. They don't know the rules that are going on, but like if the poison frog gets stuck in the sticky bark, it's going to get eaten, right? And I kind of think it's the same in our culture, in a company culture as well. There's unwritten rules, and if you do something and you cross the rules in a way that you're not meant to, it's going to have consequences. They're good things as well. I realized that as I paused, that was really bad.
Wow.
But there were obviously really good things about a culture
Yeah.
as well. Like some things can't in the jungle, some things can't exist if there aren't the other things. There's a harmony and a balance, and that is what I think culture is.
I am so thankful that you gave that description and that analogy as well. I'm an animal nerd, so if you use animal analogies, it just makes me happy. My background is in animal behavior and training, so I trained polar bears and lions and tigers and bears. Oh, that's funny. Oh my. Anteaters, alligators. I mean, I worked with all kinds of different animals and then shifted into the space of working with people. It's very interesting how similar they are. It's all behavior.
Which one's easier, working with animals or people?
You don't want me to answer that.
I think I know the answer already before I asked it, right?
Animals are really easy. And actually, the dog that we were talking about that was in the studio the other day, I was on the phone with my mom and I'm training this puppy and he's running around and my mom's like, she just takes a deep breath and she's like, Kendra, you trained a polar bear. I'm like, yes, but the polar bear doesn't run around the house with your underwear. So it's a very different situation. And then you transfer that to people that all have different emotions and upbringing and traumas that they've carried along with them, that you have so many different levels of complexity. Whereas with a polar bear's having a bad day. Guess what? He's on the other side of the fence. I go, okay, we're done training today. And then I walk away. I can't do that with my team. You guys can't do that with each other when you're working together. Just be like, oh, Emily's on the other side. Done for now. So very different and very, very similar. So Emily, thank you for the analogy of the animals, the jungle, and you said harmony. I think that's really, really key in there. The harmony piece doesn't mean it's great all the time. Doesn't mean it's awful all the time. But there's going to be these ebbs and flows that find that harmony of ups and downs. So excellent word in there to add as well. Toby, what about you? What would you add?
I feel like Emily's given almost like the perfect description where I'm like, I can't even enter that. So I'll give it a go though, because you've asked me. Community man, I think it's all about community. And I know there's that, when companies say, oh, we're all one big happy family, we know that's a lie, right? That's never the case. A company never operates as a family. The last thing I want is any company I work for to operate like my family. If that ever happens, I'm leaving that company. Personal things aside,
it's about not going for the holidays if that's the case.
It's all about community, right? And so me and Emily do a lot about community management, and how you create communities within workplaces.
Mm-hmm.
But you're all there for a reason, and this is where company purpose can be quite divisive, right? Because a lot of companies create a purpose and it doesn't really mean anything. Oh, we always put our customers first. That's not a purpose. That's not a value. That's just like a tagline.
Mm-hmm.
So why is everybody there? Is there something that unifies this group of 10, 20, 100, 10,000, 30,000 people? Why is everyone there? Because if you look at it from a sports perspective, someone put it really nicely, is like they were a runner. And they're like, if I go anywhere in the world and meet another runner, I have a conversation with them about running. Like, you can instantly have that human connection. For me, let's talk about American sports. I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, hence the cheese wedge back there. I can go to anywhere in the world and say I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, and all of a sudden I found a tribe, right? I found a community of people that I can talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the UK, you just mentioned you're an American football fan or an NFL fan, whatever. Like, you all of a sudden have found your tribe and have that similarity. So I think what most organizations don't do is kind of lean into that and figure out what that element is that unifies those people or those teams.
Mm-hmm.
And at its heart is community management. And I think, go to Emily's point, communities have, the technical terms, you kind of have like your window shoppers, the people that just have a look around, don't interact with anything. You have your trolls, you have your lurkers, and then you have your town criers. All those kind of facets in between. There are different people that have different functions within communities, and all of them are valid and bring stuff to the table. And being able to appreciate that. But again, they're unified by this either circumstance or purpose or location. Sometimes even like a village, is a community of geography. So, short answer: community.
And saying how it's like a village is beautiful versus the family aspect, right? You said it, Toby. We've heard companies say, "Oh, we're like a family." I'm like, well, my family doesn't pay me to come to Christmas. Oh, I might come if they did. And so there's a different dynamic. You're not a family. There's pay involved. There's work that's reciprocated. And so explaining it more as a village and that type of community, and then, like you said, these different roles in the community makes more sense to understanding kind of that big picture dynamic. And it also applies when it's not just company culture. There's a culture whenever you put people together, whether you're having a holiday party and you're inviting your friends, that you've done that and you've always been like, ooh, we really like that one guy, James, but is everyone else going to vibe with James? Do we invite James? Right? There's this dynamic whenever you put people together, whether it's a holiday party, a work thing, your family, probably coffee shops or the stations that we were talking about. There's a culture whenever you put people together. The thing that I think is fascinating lately, which I want to hear from you both on this, is I've had a couple of companies over the last year that we've gone in to work with. They knew they needed to improve. They just didn't know necessarily where to start and what the pieces were. So we go in, we do a deep dive, we do an assessment, and multiple times now, I have had CEOs say to me, "Oh, we don't have a culture." And I'm like, oh, but you do. You just don't know what it is. And I'm fascinated by this because there is a culture. And how is this happening where sometimes the leaders just really haven't pinpointed it? So I'm curious to know your thoughts on this, especially when you're working with companies. You're also working from an angle of data that's involved. So, how does that work? Do you see that sometimes with companies? And how do you help kind of them define what their culture is? Because it's there.
I It depends on the leader, I think, in that situation. So you have it was called Back to the Floor in the UK. Undercover Boss, I think it's called in the States.
Yeah.
Right. So Undercover Boss goes back to being a frontline worker, and go, wow, I didn't know any of this stuff was happening. Wow, I didn't know people were saying or doing this. And you're like, well, that's the culture. You're witnessing the culture and living and breathing the culture, which ordinarily your position is prohibiting you from doing. Either your position or yourself, right? Probably yourself. Like being close to your workforce is really, sorry, is really important. You shouldn't have to take a TV show to get you to uncover all this stuff. So I kind of think about one of my first jobs I had. I worked in a pub here in the UK, which was owned by an individual who also owned 4 other pubs. And each of those individual pubs had their own working culture, all of which the person who owned the pubs had zero idea about what that culture was like. And therefore, when they came in and said, oh, this and this, and we should do this, it's like you're saying stuff and articulating stuff without the kind of the context and understanding of how we're working as a community here. And some of the stuff you're saying is kind of almost opposes the very vibe that we've created, and therefore isn't received well, and therefore will never be enacted. So I think there's probably those 2 parts of it. Is like, what is your community actually doing, and how close is a leader to that community? Because and if we look at Fortune 500 or FTSE 100 companies or whatever, of course you're going to have a CEO right at the top who goes, I have no idea what the culture is like. And you're like, well, that's probably fine, but you should at least have some sort of awareness, understanding what's happening. I even think back to some of the learning and development roles I was at the UK version of Best Buy called Currys. Every Christmas or every holiday season, our team would go and work in store. We'd go and work in store for a week, and we'd go and figure out what it was like at the worst time of year to work in retail. And that gave us a real understanding of what it was like to work in that company. Now, not every department in that organization did that, because they're like, well, I'm not wasting my time going to do that. But it was a hugely important part of understanding the community you're in and the part you play. Because if you remove yourself from it, go, I'm in my ivory tower, then of course you're going to turn around and say, oh, we don't have a culture, or I don't know what the culture is like. It's like, well, you do. The problem is you're just not part of it, and that's terrible.
And going and being in that frontline space, especially when it is high stress, holiday season. I worked at a retail store out here. I won't say which one. I lasted 7 hours and then I quit. And I told the manager, I said, I've dealt with animals going to the bathroom on me, kids crying, parents yelling at me. I was like, I can't deal with hangers. This is where I tap out. And so having that opportunity for you, Toe, to be in that space and see stress and chaos and how are your people dealing with it, that's going to tell you a ton about the culture. Emily, I'd love to know if you have seen this at all. Like, have you had moments like this with like Toby, where you've gotten to see these different views, these different angles?
Yeah, I have. I did it. I used to work in New Zealand. I worked for one of the biggest retailer out there, but it's tiny compared to anything. It's 14,000 people, so New Zealand, very different type of country. But I got to go to the warehouse for a day, just a shift, to see kind of how it goes. And obviously, you're not really in it, and you are actually kind of a little bit of annoyance, because they're just trying to get on with your jobs, and they're like, oh, these people from head office, what are they doing here? But it really is eye-opening, and I think the key thing is, the idea of this, it comes from Japan. I don't speak Japanese. I think it's Genshi Genbutsu, but basically it means real world, real problem. And essentially so it comes from the Toyota production system in Japan, which is essentially go and see what's going on. And it came from understanding your users. So I think it was the Sienna minivan. We came over to the States and Canada, and to see how this like camper van was being used. And decided as a result of this is my favorite bit, this is very American, that there were the need was to have 14 cups, like cup holders even. And then that's where kind of all the big cup holders came from, because it's a big family thing. People are using it, lots of kids, you don't want to be spilling drinks. So it's come from this idea of putting a user centric, and then taking that into culture in the world of work. I think it comes from the idea that you in head office, or you as a leader, you're there to serve your people. You're there to make it employee centric, to help them thrive and to be at their best, or to give them the equivalent of the 14 cup holders, which is what they need in order to do the job that they're there to do. So I absolutely agree with Toby. I cannot remember what the question was, but I think that this idea of going and seeing what it's like and really understanding it's just going to connect you so much more to the people that work at your company.
Yeah. And then also seeing both of the examples that you each just gave, it's the same company, but there's different sides to that company. So you've got a company that has the corporate side and the warehouse. There's a company we've partnered with. They're a t-shirt company, an amazing t-shirt company. They have the corporate side, right? Everyone in the office. And then they have the folks that are making the t-shirts. They're in the warehouse. And I've talked with other very large t-shirt companies, and keeping people on the warehouse team is really difficult, because if they find out there's another t-shirt company that pays even $1 more,
Mm.
they don't even care what all the other pieces and perks and benefits are. They are like, oh, well, it's $1 more, I'm going to go there. That culture of that warehouse space is very, very different than the culture in the corporate side and in the office, right? Is there a way that you see, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it doesn't matter? Do you see there needing to be a shift and needing to connect those two different sides, or at least just respecting that the culture is different in each of those sides, right? Like you guys were saying, there's the corporate side, and then you visited the warehouse and it was very different. Is that okay? Does it need to be similar?
I don't think it needs to be similar, and I think this is the problem with most businesses, right? Is that when they bring employees in, they try to treat all employees the same,
Mhm.
which isn't equitable. That's that's equality, and let's not talk about equitable because there's the whole SHRM DEI thing. But like the idea that everyone comes to work and gets what they need as a result of giving their service is hugely valuable. You should never, if someone's willing to move to get paid $1 more, then that's clearly like that's such an easy fix. And how do you not know that actually you could save way more money and time by
Mhm.
just offering your people $1 more, right?
Mhm.
So and this is the principle of why me and Emily connected in the first place, is that we're kind of bound by human-centered design as a concept,
Mhm.
that you kind of have to bake that into your kind of holistic organizational design or employee experience design, because if you don't, you end up designing the same employee experience for everyone. I have a good friend, as an example, who works for a Formula One team here in the UK, and they just finished their engineering qualifications as a university qualification. And he went to HR and says, "What's the next step in my career?" And they offered him a forklift driving course. And like, this is one of the top engineers in your racing team, and you've just offered him a forklift driver's license as the next step in their journey, because it was like, that's what the document of him like says, I can offer you here, so I'm going to offer you that. And it's like that there is a real disconnect, that all it would have taken is a real human conversation to figure out, I don't need to give you the answer here. I need to ask you more questions about what it is actually that you want in the future. And can this company give it to you, or will you have to go elsewhere for it? And appreciating that that's also an acceptable conversation to have, that what do you want? Like, what's going to help you be engaged and perform at this organization? And if we can give it to you, we'll try and give it to you. But
Mhm.
if we can't, then you might have to go elsewhere. And I think, this is where we see shorter and shorter tenures with people, because it's like people will move to get what they want. Whereas
Mhm.
before, it was like, if you're loyal, then you'll get what you want. You'll get the 401k pay. You'll get all the health insurance. Everything kind of goes up as you rise through a company and become more loyal. That's kind of gone out the window. So you can't really design organizations in that way. You have to design them as these like quite transient places where someone might be there for 4 years, and then they go somewhere else for 4 years and go somewhere else for 4 years. That's kind of the reality, right? So to appreciate that that's going to be the very best it can be, you have no other choice other than to practice human-centered design. Figure out the different types of people that come through your organization, what do
Mhm.
they need, and offer a variety of different user journeys for your employees, not just the same one. And I think this is where the best company cultures kind of figure out, who are the people that work for us? What do they need? It sounds so simple, but
Mhm.
strategically, to try and put that concept now into some large organizations is incredibly difficult, because they've got such a huge amount of people and they're so rigid in their systems and processes that try and get them to change into a model that kind of goes, you haven't got just one customer as an employee base. You have 6 or 7 types of customers as an employee base. Now design a user journey for those 7 different types of employees rather than one. That would fundamentally break most large organizations. So it's quite a leap to get there. This is why small to medium businesses, you can kind of see that concept happen quite organically, because it's just like, oh, it's just how we do it. We're only a company of 10 people. We just talk to people and we know what everyone wants. And then all of a sudden you get between 50 to probably about 100 is where I kind of see it most often. 100 people is the point where you go, oh, we got too many people now to care. Let's give everyone the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I've seen that threshold too, that right about 100 people is when, yes, you need to have this balance of systems and processes, but how far do you take it? And turning into too structured and everybody is identical. And like you said, not giving everyone a different, almost like a choose your own adventure, right? It's going to be different for each person. Toby, will you elaborate a little bit? So I know what human-centered thinking is, but will you elaborate a little bit just so if our listeners are kind of trying to figure out what that structure really means? Can you elaborate that at all?
I probably can elaborate, but Emily is way better elaborating on process than I am.
Let's do
But
it.
the vibe is you get to know your people and you design stuff that they need and want, and alleviates the pains. But Emily's far more articulate in this area than I am.
That's kind of you to say, no pressure of me with my sort of regurgitation that's going on right now. Human-centered design, I mean, it's literally in the name. So you're putting humans at the center of your design. But let's break that down a little bit more. Okay, so humans, we're talking here about employees, about employee experience or employee journeys or company culture. We're talking about employees. The centered bit is easy. The design bit is, okay, you're making something very, very intentional. It's not accidentally kind of throwing things together. It's been intentionally crafted to put their needs at the center of what is needed. So whether that's kind of, looking at what actually happens in their journey, looking at their pain points, maybe their gains, so the things that make their life awful and the things that they celebrate and make them feel better about life. For example, your computer not updating as you're about to join a meeting, or I don't know, your first day, you've actually got something and you get to do some work and you get to talk to somebody rather than just being sat in the corner. So understanding all of those points, and there's lots of different ways you can do that. So either through observation, like we're talking about, like going and seeing what's going on. So there's observation, there's also focus groups or interviews can be really, really helpful to dig out those insights. Surveys too, but we talk less about surveys because surveys often tell you what's going on, but they don't tell you why. So it's quite hard to really draw out any design decisions. Essentially, you go through a discovery phase before you can come down to what it is, what problem you're solving or problems, and what how you're going to improve the employee experience going forwards.
Like yeah, I think you kind of mentioned, right? Like Undercover Boss is exactly that.
Yeah.
The CEO goes and spends 1 week, 2 weeks, however long on the shop floor, on the restaurant floor, whatever, and kind of goes, oh, all these things are broken. We need to fix these things. And it's like, great. That's a really great way to run an organization. But most, particularly either people departments or HR departments, tend to design things for the organization, not for the end user, for the employee. It's like, okay, we have compliance training is a really good one. We've got 6 compliance training modules that need completing. That's the only need there is from the organization. The individual doesn't come to work and go, oh, I really have some compliance modules I need to complete.
Well, like, what were we talking about the other day? We were talking about like company branded merchandise. My husband's just started a new job and we've just got so like t-shirts that are massive and a hoodie floating around. And just like, this doesn't make him feel any more bonded. This doesn't improve the experience he's had, or worse than it. We've just now got all this rubbish cluttering up our house.
Why do you think that now, I mean, in the space that the 3 of us are in, we know that this is the direction we have to focus on. We know that we have to approach this and approach culture and growth from this human-centered focus. Why do you think that is now the odd part of it? And let me rephrase this, because I feel like we've just gotten into the groove of, right, the compliance and the process improvement and all of these check the boxes. And then when you come to a company now and you're in a business and you're like, let's try human-centered thinking. And they're like, what? You're like, why is that the weird answer that I bring to companies of, hey, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do an assessment, we're going to do a deep dive. We're coming at it from a very human-centered thinking approach, and they get confused. And I really have to just say, I'm looking at it from your people's perspective, not you, CEO on your ivory tower that doesn't know what's going on. I'm looking at it from the perspective of your people, and they are sometimes just mind blown by this. That I'm looking at it from the people side. Why is this?
So I
Hard.
think, well, yeah. So there is two things, right? Is that organizations that we've worked with in the past, this is where we kind of got to starting freeformers, right? Is that applying human-centered design on a project by project basis inside of organization is really difficult, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But most HR or people roles within organizations only really seek to validate their existence. So a couple of years ago, I won a contract with an organization that it was 6 figures, and Emily's, I can see Emily going, oh, he's telling this story
No,
again.
I'm saying don't say their name. It's
No,
fine.
yeah.
Giving you the eyes.
Anonymity is key. Yeah, that's a good shout. So anyway, no. So the company in mind, the company I worked for was providing services to this other company. All very vague now, isn't it? To deliver an induction experience, six figure project, and as part of that project, we spent maybe 20% of that on research, focus groups, surveys, interviews, observations, to design what the user journey looked like from signing a contract to 12 weeks in the organization. We understood intimately what was happening with the end user over that 12-week period. However, all of that user research was funneled up into a 3-hour webinar on everyone's first day. Now, all of the research told us that that wasn't a problem. They were already delivering this webinar, by the way, on a bi-weekly basis. But it was highlighted that the facilitation wasn't very good or the production quality wasn't great. But none of the user research said, oh, you know what really annoyed me about the first day of this company was the production quality of the webinar wasn't very good. That did not come up. So that individual that kind of commissioned us to do the project looked after induction on onboarding. And that was one of their key success metrics of their role, was to deliver this project. Also, as the company I was working for was getting paid a substantial amount of money to deliver it, they were like, well, if we say that we're not going to deliver the 3-hour webinar, we're going to suggest other stuff, that contract might go away. So we lose money. So you enter this ecosystem where like both parties don't do the right thing. One, because one has to validate the role, and one doesn't want to lose a lucrative contract. So you end up kind of in this, okay, then we'll just deliver a really good version of the wrong thing. And ironically, it got an award. And you're like, this is where I left. And I was like, I have to get off this train now, because I've done this at too many companies now where it's like, this doesn't make any sense. But to go back to the early point, that's because you're trying to apply human-centered design on a project-by-project basis. That is really, really difficult, whether it's you're doing it as your job or whether you're doing it as an external, trying to face into that organization. What you really need to be able to do is bake in human-centered design as like a holistic people strategy, that you've got this pool of user research and data that is built up and managed on an ongoing basis. So when you want to design something where you kind of go, okay, I'm looking after induction onboarding, what isn't working? You go to the data first and say, okay, this isn't what's working. Let's try and move this metric. And this metric is happening on, 6 weeks in. So let's try and fix that. And all of a sudden, that 6-figure number, that budget, can be put on smaller initiatives. They're probably going to have a much larger impact. And this is, again, why I love working with Emily, because like I kind of say this and go, oh, wouldn't it be great if we did this? And then Emily goes, oh, yeah, this is how you actually do it. Where without Emily, like I would just be someone spitting words and saying, wouldn't this be a great idea? But Emily actually has the experience and the skill set to make that a reality.
Emily, we're thankful for you.
Oh,
Toby, as you're talking, I'm almost seeing the difference. And I don't know if this is the case where you guys are in the UK. Um, what I'm seeing as you're talking is it's almost the difference between the HR person at the company and the people operations person. It should kind of all be the same, right? This HR people focus. Yes, you've got some compliance pieces that HR has to be in charge of and whatnot. But I feel like those are two separate roles today, even though they shouldn't. And so as you're talking, I'm like, ooh, like the HR person is the person coming across as this is the thing. We have to do the thing. We check the box, the video compliance, blah, blah, blah. And then the people operations person is the person that's like, yeah, but let's look at it from the human perspective and what do they need and how can we support them and what's the next step in their journey. I would love for that to not be the case, especially since HR literally stands for human resources. I don't know if that's something that you see in the UK, but that's kind of what I'm seeing here.
I think if you swapped out people operations for learning and development here in the UK, I think that's probably where you get to is learning and of course when you look at the map of most HR teams, is you have HR and then you'll have recruitment, internal comms, employer brand. It's large organizations. This is an L&D, and what we're finding is there's this trend of L&D are trying to do this approach. But kind of ignoring the rest of the department it operates in, goes, well, we're going to try and rise above this ecosystem we work with, and it kind of just it almost at some element there's going to be a cannibalization of all of this stuff where it's just like everyone is just trying to validate their own existence, and so yeah, to your point, people operations and HR, they're only trying to validate their own existence, so they're not going to ever get to a point of working together. They might do.
How can they not be validated? Like, how can they not be validating their own existence though? Because the metrics that they have in place, literally the performance metrics, the success criteria are all about, like, they're all about their business, and then they have to be meeting those things, and that's all a validation of your existence.
Well, it's the wrong measures. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, yes, okay.
Like this is why we exist, right? Is that we give HR teams and people teams the right measures to be looking at. Like the classic one is attrition, right? Every client wants to fight attrition. Like, get over yourself. Like, people are going to leave your company whether you like it or not. So why, like, people are going to leave. And so what do you do in that situation when people are 100% going to leave your company? You make sure they leave your company as advocates. You make sure that they love your company when they leave. That's your responsibility now, not to try to make them stay. Even that Richard Branson quote kind of goes out the windows, like, train them well enough that they want to stay, treat them well enough that they want to leave, or something.
Yeah.
Apologies, Richard, if you're listening, but I've completely ruined your quote there. But it kind of pales into significance now, because like at some point your person will grow, not to be bigger than the organization, but their wants and needs will grow beyond what the organization is able to offer them, so they will have to move. But on a HR metrics, like, oh, attrition, we're losing people at this rate, and like, yeah, but you've not told me why they're leaving. You've not told me if they leave happy or sad. You've not told me anything about that, but you're just saying we want to fight attrition. And I go back to this induction project, right? That was the metric that they were trying to achieve, impact by delivering a more well-produced 3-hour webinar the first day. They were hoping to impact attrition. And I was like, you are barking up the wrong tree, my friend, because if you think that 3 hours is going to have any impact on attrition, I fail to believe that someone will go, oh, you know why I'm leaving? That webinar on the first day was
Toby,
just
you
not
wouldn't
well
stay?
produced enough.
You wouldn't stay because that webinar was so much better? I'd put at least another year into the company.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Well, I love the fact that this is a thing that we can even put the statistics and the data to all of this now. I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, for sure, if we were having all these conversations, I wouldn't have a business. I don't know if the two of you would have a business when trying to talk to companies about company culture and attrition and retention and all of these pieces and the data that goes with it, right? 5-10 years ago, we didn't really know necessarily how to pinpoint those pieces. And now the two of you have the data and you can help from that human perspective, pull from it as well. And then in those situations, maybe or maybe not, tell them, hey, this is not the direction that will influence. What about, to your point, Toby, they're going to leave. So, what are the next things that you're going to do? Are they going to leave grumpy? Are they going to leave supported? Are you going to help them leave? Are you going to help them look for something new? I talk with companies all the time about their offboarding. You focus so much on the onboarding piece, and then they stress, right, about the attrition, and the people are going to leave. So what's the other side of it? How can you help them then leave, and then maybe they come back? They realize the grass wasn't greener. These other companies have even worse video onboarding. And they want to go back. How do you see the offboarding piece being part of kind of the data and what you guys are working on with companies right now too?
We see it as essential, a really key differentiator for us, but for other companies as well, and how they're actually going about offboarding. In terms of the data that you can get around it, we think that alumni communities are a really, really interesting way to go. So by alumni, I'm meaning people who have left your organization, because as you said, they might come back in the future. They might refer somebody else to work for you. If you're a B2C, so a business to consumer business, like you're selling directly to consumers, they might be either advocates for your products or buy them themselves.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of value to be had. So we often talk about alumni networks, and the simplest way, and this is for anybody listening, the simplest way you want to start one up is when people leave, when they do their exit form or they hand in their resignation, you very, very quickly get a consent. I know consent laws are different in the US, but if you just get a consent saying, will we, or do you consent to us keeping you informed of what we're doing? Or do you consent to join our alumni network? And then you've instantly got indicators, yes or no. And it's binary, right? It's yes or it's no. And then you can see how many people are interested in staying to be a part, and that's already going to be telling you something, right? And then you can manage it like a marketing, like using marketing metrics, right? So you newsletter, again, super simple to start with, a newsletter, and then you're looking at like, are people engaging with it? And then you can like grow from there if people are engaging, and there's lots of other metrics you can put around. We would recommend strongly borrowing from the world of marketing, like I said. That is a really, really key way to gauge how people are how people leave your company. And I think the other key thing there is that's where you need to put all your new job posts through, like put them through. And then when people are applying for jobs, were you referred by anybody? And then you can instantly start matching up that value from someone who used to work for your company.
Mhm.
I think one of the really lovely stories that we've had in recent months is that I was at a networking event here in the UK explaining the methodology that Emily's just talked about. And this company, this person was originally from the Middle East and rang one of his friends up who owns a company in the Middle East and went, hey, have you thought about this? And now every quarter, they have a lunch with all their ex-employees. They invite all of their ex-employees to lunch every quarter. And they said they've done it twice already. Like, and the amount of insight they're getting
Mhm.
about their industry, about their market, about what they're like as an employer is crazy. Now, of course, this is a slightly smaller organization, right? This isn't a company of 300,000 people that's offboarding, thousands of people a year, paying for the lunch. But even as a leader with a team, right, to kind of go, it goes back to community, right? The whole kind of system of employment is contract end, see you later, we don't know each other anymore, this is a
Yeah.
messy divorce. And it's like, it doesn't have to be like that. That doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And in some cases it absolutely has to be. Like some cases that there is that messy end of that employer-employee relationship, but
Mhm.
that shouldn't have to be the default point. That should be just one of many different scenarios of this ending. So just because someone moves out of the village doesn't mean they cease to be part of the community, because if they came back to the village, you'd probably welcome them back with open arms.
Mhm.
And this is, again, goes back to not open arms. You're not necessarily going to give them a hug, but like, this is where it differs to a family, right? Like that It isn't a divorce. It's not we've formally consciously uncoupled.
Yeah.
This is we've both got to move on and do our different things, but we can still be connected, and that's absolutely fine. And to Emily's point, I can say all the fluffy stuff, but you can measure that stuff as well and then report on it. One of our very first clients, actually, in a meeting that we were in, it was the first or second meeting we're having with them. They said, "Oh, we just won a new client." I was like, "Great news! Where did that come from?" "Oh, he used to work for us 10 years ago." It's like, great. That isn't anything to do with sales or marketing. That's to do with your employee experience.
Yeah.
Let your HR team or your people team measure that value that they've just added to the organization, because they would have not signed that contract if it wasn't for their experience with you as an employer. Nothing to do with sales or marketing. But you can bet your bottom dollar in the reporting, sales and marketing were covering that, going, "Hey, we got a new win this quarter." And it's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
HR got you that. But HR doesn't measure it, because like, contract ends, see you later, don't care.
Mm-hmm. They do. They tend to act like it's the end of the line. Okay, you're moving on, instead of fostering that relationship. Emily, that example that you gave is beautiful. There is a company called Field Agent, and they do something similar. An amazing company. I can introduce you to Rick West. He's the CEO there. And they do something similar. They invite all of their past employees when they do their family barbecues. So they'll do a summer barbecue, I think, and then a holiday barbecue, but they invite everybody back. And I'm sure, Toby, to your point, I'm sure there's a couple that they're like, "No, you're on the you're on the blacklist. You're the two that are not coming back to these family barbecues." But everybody else is still part of that alumni family, and they get welcomed back. And then they are, Toby, to that example that you just gave, they're helping market and bring in business and tell everybody about the company. They're not going to tell they're not going to recruit their friends and their partners if it wasn't a company they didn't believe in, right? They're not going to be like, "Oh, let me partner you with this horrible company I worked with a little while back." They're only going to tell and loop in their friends and their family and these partners if it really is a company that they trust and they believe in.
And there's a really great book called The Employee Experience Advantage, which talks about a kind of a Google case study, that their recruitment referral bonus for employees was $2,000, and they're like, "Oh, we want to get more," and so they increased it to $4,000, and it didn't move the metric at all, because of what you said, right? Is that it's a vibe, it's a feeling. You're not going to introduce your friends and family or people for an extra $2,000 if it's a rubbish place to work. But it swings the other way, right? So we've talked about kind of creating positive commercial value and brand equity. If it goes the other way, you're going to create negative commercial value and negative brand equity, which is so much harder to claw back as well. Like, I can't tell you the number of companies I've left, and I've talked smack about them on various channels. Like, I'm just put it out there. Like, if you're watching as well, sorry, you should have treated me better. But I'm not the only one, right? There are people that do that. WhatsApp channels, Reddit forums are absolute goldmine for this stuff.
Yeah.
People, you think you've got troubles if you're looking at Glassdoor and Yelp and all those kind of things. Like, take a look on Reddit and then really see what your employees and ex-employees are saying about you. Then you'll start to worry. Glassdoor is only like scratching the surface of what people feel they can say in this forum. Reddit, no holds barred.
No holds back. Toby, I give a lot of examples on this podcast. I've worked for companies that had a great culture. I worked for some companies that did not. I look at all of those experiences as extremely beneficial, that formed who I am today and the business that I have and why I have it, because companies should be better. They deserve to be better. But if you were to look at my LinkedIn and things like that, you could piece together some of these examples. So I'm
Well,
not.
I used to actively recommend people go and work at one of my previous employers, but I put a massive caveat on top of it. I said, you should go and work there. The experience you'll get, the intense level of working, the breadth of work you do, the client base is incredible. Work there for 12 to 24 months. Work there no longer, because it won't be worth. like the balance of what you're getting versus the reward after that 1 to 2 year period, boom, completely flips, and you will stop ceasing to get value. You'll start,
Burning
you'll
out.
impact you'll start burning out. So it's like, so I was still recommending, even though I'd left that company and like would never go back, I was recommending like, you should go work there, but work there for like 12 months and just like
And
take everything you need.
Toby, they have a massive churn problem.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You'll
Huge.
Well, I am so thankful for the two of you that we got to have this conversation. Amazingly enough, it's almost been an hour. So now we wind down, we wrap up. It's crazy to me how fast this can go. A lot of times before we bring a guest on, they're like, an entire hour and you don't take a break? I'm like, no, it's the same thing if we were just sitting having coffee. And that's exactly what just happened. Just many miles apart. Because Toby, what part are you in the UK? And Emily, where are you?
So I'm in Norfolk, so which is kind of I'm on the most easterly part of the UK, essentially, is where I am.
And then
I'm a bit central southwest, bit south of Oxford, bit west of London.
Okay.
Ironically, though, before we started this company, we used to live about 20 minutes, 30 minutes away from each other, and then I moved over to this side of the country. So, like the fact we now live 3.5 hours away from each other is completely my fault.
How funny. And that we're in Arizona and technology exists the way that it does so that we can have these amazing conversations. And that I did get to see Toby in real life, in person, and hug him a few weeks back out here in Arizona. So that was awesome.
That was very cool.
As we wrap up, is there any last final little 30-second, 60-second that either one of you wants to add, share, go, oh my gosh, I forgot to say this, anything from either one of you?
I think the only thing I haven't said is the overarching principle is like, treat your employees like customers. Like that's kind of our philosophy, right? So everything that we do is rooted in marketing and customer success, product and service design. It's all customer stuff, but for your employees. And try and create a mutually beneficial relationship between them. And that's one of the metrics that we're working on at the moment is employer lifetime value. How much value do you get out of? How much value do you give your people over the length of time of that relationship? And employee lifetime value. How much value do you get out of them? And what is the relationship between those two figures? Like understanding what the balance of this relationship is a real indicator of how you are working with your people. Because at the moment, Emily alluded to it, we don't really say surveys because most of how you evaluate how your people think and feel about your workplace is done through surveys, and it doesn't really tell you a lot. And the fact that in some companies do it on an annual basis and try and determine that how did we move from point A to point B in a year, it's like that's impossible. So I think that's probably just a quick summary. Emily, is there anything to add?
The only thing that I would add is that going and seeing what it's like applies to your people. But if you're looking to measure, and please start measuring this stuff because it's important, and it's misquoted, but what gets managed gets measured. No, what gets measured gets managed. Right? It might be a misquote. It doesn't really matter. The point still stands. Right? You need to measure this stuff, and so go and see what your marketing teams are doing. Go and see what your sales teams are doing. Go and get these influences from other parts of your business. Bring the influence back, and then just make some magic and make it special. And just measure it, please.
Yes. I'm going to have the two of you hang on for a second. I want to share a quick announcement about our sponsor, and then we'll come back and have everyone hear how they can reach out to you. So hang on tight for a second.
Remember when your banker knew you and cared about you? This experience still exists at Gateway Bank, the only community bank in Mesa, Arizona, serving customers Valley and nationwide. With Gateway, you get the fast personal service of a small bank with the convenience, security, and stability of a large one. Whether you need a loan or banking services for your business, they're here for you. Visit gcbaz.com/Culture Crush for details and a free consultation with Gateway President James Christensen.
So thank you again to the two of you. This was so great to have this conversation. Toby and I have been throwing multiple dates around on the calendar between him and the studio and all of this. So I am so thankful we were able to make this happen. As folks are listening to this episode and they're like, oh, I really want to get in touch with Toby and Emily, how would you like them to do so? How should they reach you?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where I live now. I've pretty much disabled every other social media channel I have just for LinkedIn. And you could email me, toby@freeformers.com if you want, but you're probably going to get a quicker response if you give me a like or a comment on a post or just slide into my DMs.
Perfect. Emily, does that work for you too?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to see the more formal stuff, the website is freeformers.com, and we would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you again to both of you. And thank you for everyone else listening in. This was another episode of the Culture Crush Business Podcast. We are your hub of company culture resources. So when you're looking to improve your company culture, you're looking for some amazing resources like these two, and you're not really sure where to find them, you come to us. We do a deep dive with you and we match you. We're like your culture matchmaker, but better. So thank you again for everyone listening, and we'll touch base soon.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Culture Crush Business Podcast. Culture Crush is your hub for company culture resources. If you think your company has a strong culture that should be highlighted, we want to hear from you. If you are a company that supports growing great cultures, then we want to hear from you too. Connect with us at info@culturecrushbusiness.com.